Hi everyone. Welcome again. I am Bridget Zingale and I'm a field marketing manager here at HubSpot. And I'm here today with our new VP of funnel marketing, John Dick. We are incredibly excited to have him here. And
I think you're muted.
No, I'm definitely not.
Oh. Small technical challenge here.
Sorry, 1 second, everyone.
It's possible that we're muted. Unclear. Small technical.
Okay. All right. Back in action. So he has recently joined us from Trunk Club, which has been a very successful startup. And he is tasked with managing all of the teams that help create an efficient marketing funnel here at HubSpot. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So a few household items. There's a chat pane, so definitely use that to ask questions. We'll be monitoring that throughout. And anything we don't get to during the session, we will follow up with answers via your emails. So let's get started. Welcome, John. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Bridget. I'm excited to be here. It's nice to talk with everyone. Thanks for joining.
I appreciate your orange funnel that you brought with you.
I brought a novelty orange funnel so that we have a visual prop to help us talk through the funnel today. Very helpful.
So to kick us off, John, please, could you describe what funnel marketing actually is and how that might differ from the way your kind of average marketing team is set up?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And it's kind of an ironic question because, like, in my mind, all marketing drives demand. And that's pretty much the purpose of marketing, whether it's PR, whether it's brand marketing. Like, at the end of the day, the purpose of doing that is to actually drive demand for the company. And inherently, demand flows through a funnel. So on the one hand, all marketing is funnel marketing. I think what distinguishes a funnel marketing team in particular is primarily the measurability of a funnel. And so most funnel marketers are explicitly driving measurable demand through various phases of a funnel. And I think that's one of the big things that differentiates funnel marketing from other sorts of marketing. And there's a lot of different names for funnel marketing. I think a lot of companies would call it, acquisition marketing. Sure. So there'd be an acquisition team that's focused on actually driving demand through the funnel. I think some companies would think that direct response marketing is closest to a funnel team. So direct response, of course, being where someone can directly respond to a message that you have out there and you can actually track them through the funnel. I think some other interesting characteristics of a funnel team are, number one, ideally they're channel agnostic.
Sure.
Every channel owner, of course, has a funnel. And I would say that anyone, if you're out there and you are someone who is managing Facebook for your company or who's managing email for your company, like, you should be looking at your funnels. But I think one of the things that distinguishes what we're calling funnel marketing today is kind of being somewhat channel agnostic and looking at the bigger picture of the way that all channels come together to actually drive demand through the funnel.
Definitely. That's a really great point, because there's so many things that sort of feed that funnel that it's easy to get siloed, which is dangerous.
Yeah. I think that funnel marketers should really be looking at all the different channels that feed into their funnel and should be understanding kind of the trade-offs between volume and conversion, which is really quality that you get from those different channels. And ideally, a funnel marketer, I think, has a whole bunch of different levers they can pull to deliver on the demand goals for the business.
Sure.
And I think that's, again, that kind of channel agnostic approach is one of the things that is powerful about a funnel marketing approach.
Definitely. So let's say the people listening have not fully taken to the strategy yet and they want to starting tomorrow. What would you say would be kind of the first thing they should do to make sure that their existing marketing team starts to operate this way?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple things that people can do if they're trying to get started with kind of looking full funnel. The first thing that's just really important is the ability to track demand through your funnel. So there's a lot of tools that people use. I would advocate to any marketer that having a really good analytics setup up front is something that's worth investing in. I think the number of companies I've seen through the years that haven't invested in proper analytics up front, I think that can really bite you later. It's because
like flying blind.
It's like flying blind, and it's just impossible to actually optimize your funnel if you can't actually measure it. So I think step one is you need to measure it. And I think, step two, there's some questions about like, I don't know, like where do you start? Should you focus on traffic? Should you focus on conversion? Like, what's the best way there? And, I think that you could start with either. I think in my experience, it's best to start at the top of the funnel. I think generally speaking, as you see in this funnel here, you have a really wide top to it and a narrow bottom. And I think that I've seen that it's easier to produce traffic and leads at the top of the funnel than it is to get great at conversion. And I've rarely seen a situation. I've seen a few situations where too much traffic or too much volume has caused problems down the line, but it's kind of, the first problem that I would try and solve for is volume at the top of the funnel in those tactics. And I think if you can get traffic to your site and you can get leads from that traffic, then I think that you can start to measure how it converts.
Sure.
And I think you can then look for opportunities to actually optimize those conversions based on testing and different email nurture flows and things like that.
Definitely. And at a high level, what would you say, just in case there's any confusion, the main stages of most funnels are? Can you break those down for us?
Yeah. So, the way we define it here at HubSpot with the inbound marketing methodology is about attracting visitors or prospects to your site. It's about converting, and it's about closing. And those are kind of the three phases that we think about. And I think that maps, of course, really cleanly to a funnel.
Yeah.
And so I would advocate again that a first strategy would be about attracting, visitors, prospects to your website. And there's a lot of tactics that you can do there. It kind of depends on your business model and what's right for you.
Sure. That makes sense. And what about as they look across their organization? So is the marketing funnel the same as the sales funnel, and how do they make sure that there's alignment there?
So ideally, I think that for companies that have a funnel that drives into an inside sales force or an outside sales force, it's, I think, pretty important that the marketing funnel and the sales funnel line up. And it's actually, in my mind, one of the most important relationships that a funnel marketer can have if your business model relies on a sales team is actually to build a great relationship with that sales team, to be really partnered closely with the sales operations team and the sales leadership so that there's kind of a unified vision of how we think about the demand that we're bringing in, the type of tactics we're using to convert it, when sales folks should contact those leads versus when marketing should be contacting those leads. One of the mantras that we always take is to solve for the customer here at HubSpot. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. If your marketing and sales teams aren't aligned, then you're potentially giving a really bad experience to the prospects that are in your funnel, and that can really damage their point of view there. There are other funnels, though, that are different. I spent a number of years working at Klout, which measured people's online social media influence. And in that company, for the consumer side of our business, my closest partner was actually the product team. And because our consumer model didn't rely on a sales team to actually close customers. It actually relied on the product to keep those customers engaged. And so our funnel looked a little different than an inbound sales lead model. Instead, it was people signed up. So our goal was to get people to the site. We did a lot of conversion rate optimization to try and maximize the number of people that would sign up. And then instead of lead nurturing, what we did was we did basically engagement emails to try and drive engagement back to the app. And so in that case, I think being partnered with the product team was a really crucial relationship.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. So I guess as people start to map out their funnels, they'll sort of see different alignments that are necessary across their organization.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think the simple way to think about it is that if people are converting touchlessly on your website, then I think the closest relationship is with your web team, your product and engineering team. I think if your business model relies on a sales team, then I think one of your closest relationships should be with the sales team.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, definitely. Let's dive in a little bit on the middle of the funnel, because that's something we get questions about a lot. And I think that's one of the trickiest areas, right?
It's really hard. It's really, really hard.
So what sort of tactics do you have? Let's start with just looking at the current middle of the funnel. What would you look for? What would you sort of try to hone in on in terms of optimizations as a first step?
So I mean, again, I think the most important thing is to be able to measure up and down your funnel. And so if you're looking at the middle of the funnel, I think the first thing you need to understand is like, what role does your middle of funnel actually play in converting customers? The tactics that you can deploy there are programmatic tactics. So the most common one would be email nurture flows. There are other kind of programmatic workflow-based solutions, though. If you have an app, then it could be push notice instead of emails. It's kind of channel agnostic, but some sort of programmatic series of communications that is intended to introduce someone to the value that you offer to them, help them understand the problems you solve, and help prepare them to consider being a customer of yours.
Sure.
And so first you need to kind of understand just where the impact that that's having in the entire funnel. Then I think you can actually really start looking at the individual channels within the middle of funnel. So look at your email nurture flow performance and kind of measure overall, efficiency of it. I think metrics that I always look for in email nurture flows, you want to look at churn rates out of the list. You want to look at unsubscribe rates. There's a lot of good data online about healthy unsubscribe rates.
Totally.
Under 1% always feels really good. Even lower than that would be ideal for sure. I also like to look, of course, at click-through rates. And I think a really powerful email metric that some people are using and some people have evangelized online is actually click-to-open rate. So the percentage of people who clicked through from an email over the number who opened the email. I think sometimes when you look at your click-through rates in email, it can feel difficult to move in a dramatic way. Where if you're looking at click-to-open rate, you can actually see some nice moves in that, and you can really see how the optimizations you're making can move that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for testing, I would say that's one of the most important ones because it really gives you a sense of, okay, so they saw the email and then either they liked something or they didn't.
And like the common logic, although we've got some interesting data that has kind of flown contrary to this recently that I saw, but the common logic is that the only thing that really impacts open rate is going to be the subject line. And your ability to write a great subject line is what's going to drive open rate, and the content of the email and the CTA placement are what's going to drive the actual click-through rate. And so, if you're looking just at overall click-through rate, it can be difficult to actually suss out which of those two issues is at play. So if you look at open rate for your subject line and you look at click to open rate for your content effectiveness, that can be a powerful way to look at the two different pieces.
Absolutely. Subject line and sender can always be an interesting test.
Sender is also really interesting.
Who it's
coming from a person versus coming from a company.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot there. Although we recently have uncovered some data that has actually shown that with content being the same in an email, different subject lines have actually driven some different click-through rates too. So there might be some other factors at play there where people are being primed to expect something from an email, and they decide they're going to click through even before they really open the email.
Definitely, yeah. Sometimes you only get a few seconds even when they open the email.
It's true.
Probably most of the time.
Yeah,
sadly.
I think brevity certainly matters. So that covers on like the programmatic side of middle of the funnel. I think that the other side is one-off communications, essentially one-off promotions or messages that you're sending, educational pieces, things along those lines. And, the approach that we traditionally take is, we put most of our middle of funnel people through a nurture flow that's more programmatic in nature. And then for those that don't move forward in the funnel, we actually will send them, one-off communications that can add additional value depending on who they are.
Definitely, yeah.
I think a couple trends in middle of funnel that matter and that I think are really interesting. One, of course, is personalization. I think that that's true of all communication. So that's, it's not rocket science, but and people talk a lot about it. But I do think it really matters. And I think that, the more that you as a marketer can actually segment your lists in your middle of funnel and can send them communications, either programmatic or one-off, that are relevant to them. Yeah. I think that really does matter for people right now.
Definitely. I think nurturing in general, I'm so glad you keep bringing this up because it's something that is often overlooked when people set up a marketing strategy, and it's so important. And if you see any drop off, especially between the middle of the funnel and bottom of the funnel, the first place you should look is your nurturing campaigns. See what people liked and didn't like.
Yeah.
Definitely. So this is a good segue also into just general metrics and how you make sure as you're mapping this out and you're handling things strategically, programmatically, what do you look for to make sure that things are moving the way you want them to?
Yeah. Well, conversion rate is obviously the most important metric if you want to drive an efficient funnel. And I would recommend looking at a number of different conversion rates. I think number one, you want to look at a top of the funnel to bottom of funnel conversion rate. But really similar to the way we were just talking about with email, how it can be difficult to move the overall click-through rate because the denominator is so big.
Yeah.
It can be the same with leads and customers. So, although that should be your primary metric is how efficient overall is the funnel, normally what I would recommend is that you for each phase of the funnel, you're looking at the conversion rates of those phases and understanding kind of what's working well, what's not working well. It can be really insightful to break down your whole funnel by step and look at the conversion rate from step to step to step.
So as leads convert, making sure that each one of those has a specific percentage tied to it, basically.
Yes, and understanding, benchmarking those. I think overall, like how do you understand how well a funnel's doing? I actually think relative data is really important. So looking at trends in a funnel is really important. So things that I like to look at, beyond just conversion rate at a point in time is I want to see how that conversion rate is trending over time, right? Are we seeing that our conversion rate is actually trending down or up over time? And if it's trending up, why is it trending up?
Yeah.
Knowing that, email is becoming less effective for people overall in the industry, like conversion rates tend to be trending down there. And so I think looking at that over time really matters. And that's what I kind of mean by relative data.
Yeah, sure.
I also like to look by source, how things convert. I think it can be really powerful to understand what your highest quality sources are. So a really good example is, organic search versus social media.
Yeah.
Right. If you just look at those two sources, like which has a higher conversion rate, and that could actually inform the way that you choose to invest going forward in how to improve your funnel.
Yeah, absolutely. And also how you build out your teams going forward. Definitely.
There's other metrics that I think really matter. And some of it depends on your business model a little bit, but I think that customer acquisition cost is a really important funnel metric to be monitoring. Some companies are willing to acquire customers unprofitably. You see this a lot out of startups that are in growth phase. They say, I'm openly willing to sacrifice profitability for growth, and they make that trade-off. Other companies run a really tight funnel and say, this is how much profit we make on any customer, and we can't spend more than that to actually acquire customers into the funnel. And so the things that, of course, go into your customer acquisition cost, number one, any media costs. That's kind of the first one. So if you're deploying, if you're boosting your posts on social media, the cost of boosting those posts would have to, should be included there. Additionally, you want to include any content costs. So if you're, using freelancers to actually develop the content for your campaign, and then you should include your sales and marketing costs, employee costs there as well, to kind of get a picture of like, how much is it costing to actually get a customer in the funnel? And I think that's the ultimate metric of how efficient your funnel is whether or not it can, essentially grow your business within the constraints of how your business needs to grow economically.
Definitely. Another thing that comes up are sort of the softer metrics, so for instance, how do people ensure that they get feedback from the sales team, which is really closing, or from the product team based on the data that they see, and make sure that all of that is sort of in line as they also focus on their funnel?
I think feedback from, we'll talk about like a sales model first, sales funnel first. I think feedback from the sales team about what customers are saying and what's working is incredibly important. So, not only do I think it's important to create the forums where you can get feedback from your salespeople about like what tactics are working. I also think it's important for marketers to be on the phone with salespeople on a fairly regular cadence, so they can actually hear from customers the sort of questions they have.
Definitely.
One of my beliefs as a marketer is that a great opportunity is to figure out what's working really well for sales, and then figure out how you can automate that in a way that helps the salespeople keep moving on to more important things. And you can basically programmatically, figure that out. So if there's a piece of content that your sales team, say a feature comparison sheet, and your sales team is saying, everyone is asking for it, we're providing it, that may be something that you can send during a nurture flow, further down the funnel.
That's a great point. Definitely. What about for like the services team and making sure that people that convert are happy and getting what they need, and then, everything sort of after the funnel technically ends is still going smoothly?
It's ironic that I didn't bring up the service team. It's so easy to forget about the service team, I think, is the reality in the world of funnel marketing, because services happens down here, more or less, unless you've built a funnel that continues down to look at customer retention over time. And some companies do that. I would say, though, that more often than not, I see kind of funnel marketing or acquisition marketing broken up from retention marketing or customer marketing. I see that as the most common way that marketing teams organize. So it's really easy to lose sight of that. I think, number one, I have incredible respect for service teams. I think that service professionals have to deal with a tremendous amount of stuff that we as marketers, and emotions and human emotions. So I have a ton of respect there. And I think that actually, I sit in on support calls as well as sales calls, so that I can hear kind of what's happening for customers further down the line. One of the biggest things that can cause like support or service issues or customer complaints and ultimately churn down the line is setting the wrong expectations about, what your product does, which, I think kind of ties back to middle of funnel nurturing a little bit.
Definitely.
Like I would guess that this community probably receives a lot of communications from a lot of salespeople offering them software, services, things like that. I think one of the best things that sales and marketing teams can do right now is be really explicit about what they do and what they don't do as a product and as a company. And I think that, it kind of feels a little bit like what's old is new again. And it feels like we're actually swinging back to a marketing communication style a little bit that is more grounded in honesty and being upfront about, yeah, I'm into honesty. I like it. But I see that a lot. I see, a lot of salespeople say, our product does everything. And, like that immediately just doesn't work for me, because I don't have a problem with everything. I have a specific problem. And if you get that problem right, like I'll talk to you, because I need to solve that problem. So I do think that like that's setting the right expectations is important. And I think doing that through, really clear, crisp articulations of what you do and the problems you solve, I think can be a really positive impact on your funnel.
Definitely. And it's also something that as you look towards scale, customer retention becomes more and more important. Mm-hmm. So if you're in that mode right now, making sure that you see what happens after the funnel technically ends can make a huge difference down the line.
Yeah.
So there's a question that comes up a lot, and we touched on this a little bit in terms of team structure, but let's talk about team structure and also team alignment. So let's say you have your social media manager, your paid manager, your organic manager. What are some of the tactics that you can employ to make sure they really are aligned in their efforts and working towards the same goal, and that everyone on the marketing team is sort of really plugged in to this strategy?
This is a hard problem, and I've seen it at every single company I've ever worked at, is how do you actually organize the team to execute in a clean way? And the challenge is, you can organize by goal. And so, for a funnel team, the goal is acquisition of new customers. Or you can organize by channel. So you could organize by, social media channels, email, and you can basically say to those channel groups, you can say you have acquisition goals and you have customer communication goals. And I think it really depends a lot on whether you're willing to make a fundamental trade-off, which I think is between like channel control and autonomy and speed of execution of the teams. And I think there is a trade-off. If you go the path of saying, we're going to basically organize around different goals, then I think you have to accept the fact that there could be some overlap in email, and there could be best practices that aren't being shared, and your customers could be getting too many emails. And that is a trade-off you may be willing to make in order to drive a really good funnel and good funnel efficiency. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, if you centralize more and say, no, like there's a team that sends email and that team supports all of the different goals of the organization, then you have to accept the fact that that team is going to move slower, and you'll get probably healthier channel metrics, but you'll have probably less healthy funnel metrics, especially if you're a fast growing company.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what sort of skill sets would you look for like what sort of skill sets might be missing for a team that really wants to adopt their funnel strategy? Is it an analytical skill set? Is it, are there specific tools that people need to make sure they have to make this easier?
It's a good question. I think the most important thing for a funnel marketer is analytical savvy. I think truly, if you want to be a great funnel marketer, you need to really understand how to look at data in different ways. So for instance, I think that looking at cohorted funnel data is the best way to understand conversion rates. So if a whole group of people come in the month of July, I would actually want to see over the following 6 months how many of them actually converted into customers. And that's the conversion rate I'd want to look at. There's also value in looking at how many you put in the month of July and how many customers you got in the month of July. That's not a true conversion rate. So you kind of need to be savvy enough to flip back and forth there. And you need to kind of use that cohorted data to understand how well your funnel's performing. And you need to kind of use your time boxed data to really like manage your business on a month to month basis to ensure that you're delivering on the right demand for your sales team or for your business. So I think analytics is really important. There's still creativity involved. I mean, I think you have to, be creative, not just in the type of content that you're putting into your funnel, but I think you also have to be creative about different solutions for how you could try and test things. And creativity comes in a lot of forms.
Definitely. Testing is so important, and I don't think people often they'll rule out channels, for instance, because they think their audience isn't there, but often that's not true.
That is definitely true. I've had some surprises in my career there.
Absolutely. And then in terms of the time box data, would you say that's more just for kind of managing trends and making sure nothing crazy has sort of come up and sort of making sure you right the ship or optimize on things?
I think that's very much about understanding, like, am I going to hit my goal for this month?
Yeah.
Right. If you're looking at that cohorted data, then those leads that you put in July, like some of them may not convert until September or October. And so it can be really difficult to project your business that way.
Sure.
Whereas if you're looking at more of the time boxed data approach, you can feel some more like confidence that you're delivering on the goals you said you'd deliver on.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are coming up on our time. Do you have any final pieces of advice or tips for our listeners before we sign off?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all comes down to measurement. I think that, I can't advocate strongly enough that people on a fairly regular basis are looking at their funnel metrics and ensuring that their funnel is performing as expected. I've seen so many times in my career where, you just aren't paying that close attention, and you pull up 3, 4, 5 months later, and it turns out you've been, acquiring completely unprofitably for, 5 or 6 months, or that there's a small thing that's just not working as well as you thought it did, or that the effectiveness of wore off over time. So I just advocate that people, that's what I do on Monday mornings. It's pretty nerdy, but I geek out every Monday morning and really get into my funnel data.
Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks,
and
everyone.
Thank you, everyone who hopped on the line. Thanks.